Hello, this is Mark Tucker.
And this is Alan Firstenberg, and we are two voice devs.
Two voice devs. Hey,
Mark,
Alan, it's good to see you.
Mark, it is great to see you as well in your new digs.
Yes, I don't know if you can see behind me, there are still some boxes that need to be unpacked. I have moved. So it's just been kind of crazy. Thanks for carrying the load while I've been gone, Alan.
No, it's always good. It's always great to have guest hosts in, but it is even better to have you on, my friend.
Thanks. It's good to be back.
And I was eagerly awaiting your return because of the subject that we were going to be talking about. Um, is just it's the perfect subject for us to uh to chat about, I thought.
Yeah, and so this has come out just a little bit ago, and it's taken me time to move and kind of get unpacked a little bit, and my world back to some sense of normal. But this came out the week, yeah, this came out the week that I was moving. In fact, I was closing down my laptop and like, okay, this is I'm packing it away. Um, and I saw like, what? There's announcements about Alexa Plus, and there's development stuff, and I'm just like, I can't deal with this right now. Uh,
So
it's taken a while.
so let's talk about the the basic news for starters. Amazon has announced Alexa Plus after only what, a year and a half that
Yes,
we've been waiting for this. And as surprising absolutely nobody, it is a large language model based Alexa.
yes,
And it will work on almost all, not quite all, but almost all of the current Alexa devices.
yes.
Um, Plus, they're introducing some new ones, or they've hinted at some new ones, but we don't care about those.
That's what we're talking about today.
And it's kind of exciting. So what I
Yeah.
mean, just looking at the new Alexa or Alexa Plus, kind of what's the distinguishing feature here?
I'll tackle two things first before I jump in to that question. One is that Alexa Plus is going to be available free to Prime members, and if not, would require a subscription of $19.99 a month.
Yes, and that
Is
was one of the big
yeah,
differences.
and my understanding is that the current existing Alexa skills and classic Alexa, or whatever you want to call it, right, is still going to be around. And so those developers that have skills that are working on Alexa and want to create new skills, that is a platform that you can do that with.
Right.
Um, but we are focusing on Alexa Plus and on the LLMs and what developers can do to create for the new platform, because that is different. That's going to be a different way of programming and different capabilities, feature sets. So
But but but
yeah,
I
you
do
could be a
think
classic developer and a new LLM Alexa developer too.
but I do think it is important to emphasize that the classic skills, at least so far, are not going away. So
They aren't going away, but they are not migrating either.
mostly there
So
are a couple of things that do sound like they're sort of migrating, sort of, kind of. We'll talk about that in a moment,
yeah,
though.
yeah, we will definitely talk about that. The other thing is, it's like when this came out, and the first comment I was able to make to the Alexa Champions Slack group that I'm on it was just kind of this plea: Amazon, make me love programming for Alexa again. And and there was a number of people that shared those types of sentiments. It just seems like things have, this last year and a half, and to a certain extent even before that, things had kind of been frozen in a holding pattern, and some of the first features available then weren't renewed and deprecated. And so it just kind of feels like this world of uncertainty that Alexa developers were in, as far as, um, you know, is it worthwhile to develop for Alexa anymore? What's new? What can I do that's different than what I could do before?
And
type of thing.
I mean, to me, it still sounds like, I mean, I think we'll answer that question at the end. Let's make sure we get
Yeah,
back to that question at the end of, um, will we love developing for Alexa again? But I think kind of the question is there still is uncertainty. I
yeah,
mean, as far as I know, not a lot of people have been invited to develop for it yet. It's still an early access program.
yeah.
I don't know what you as a channel would use access to. I applied for it. I haven't gotten access yet. Not surprised. But they have worked with a couple of partners
Yeah.
to
So partners that were shown on the video were things like Ticketmaster, Spotify, Thumbtack, OpenTable, um, things like that. So yeah, I did sign up, and even Alexa champions at this point have no access to documentation. It's still early access only. It's not even to preview.
right. So let's get into and talk about what we do know, which admittedly isn't a lot, but there's a little. And almost all of this is coming from a blog post they made about introducing AI native SDKs for Alexa Plus. And
Right.
we'll post that
So
link.
yeah, I did not watch the presentation, the event. So there's probably were more demo videos or like even consumer facing, videos highlighting different features. I have not seen those. I have seen primarily this Alexa Skills developer blog post that is about the kind of three different types of um, Alexa AI
Mhm.
things you can create for Alexa Plus.
Now, one of the things I thought was interesting though is they talk about these three types, but they also talk about the fact that even the classic Alexa skills will be, do get this AI enhancement. So if you've published an audio skill, that still works the same. You as a developer still have the same APIs to it, but now people will be able to give it more fluid instructions and have the AI, the LLM work with it. Or if you're building a home automation skill, so you're integrating home automation hardware with Alexa, now you're just going to be able to take advantage of the more fluid conversation that's been built into Alexa Plus. The example I keep hearing is that you'll be able to say things like, you know, hey Alexa, it's pretty dark in here, and it will turn the light on. Whereas before you had to be explicit about wanting to turn a light on. So all of those kinds of skills get carried over into the new Alexa Plus and get the benefit of the new Alexa Plus automatically.
Um, I think that is partially true.
That was the impression I
Um,
got anyway.
yeah. So here I'm trying to find the specific. Okay. So under the title, so this is even before we jump into the three different types.
Right.
There's a heading called "Building for Alexa Plus," and the first sentence is, "We re-architected the skills category kits to incorporate generative AI-powered experiences while maintaining the developer interfaces and implementations. For customers, this means many of the services they know and love, like their favorite music provider or their smart home devices, are available and enhanced on Alexa Plus." So that was kind of interesting wording. And so I kind of dug back into some Alexa documentation, and this thing where it says skills category kits
Hmm.
in the documentation for Alexa, classic Alexa, which is the only thing you have access to docs right now. But anyway, there were different examples like music and radio catalog and podcast catalog. So I think, and what those types of skills were kind of a special subset. Most of the things I created with Alexa
Right.
were were custom skills, but there was a special subclass of skills that were catalog skills, and there were APIs that you would upload your catalog of music or your catalog of podcasts to. And I think what I don't have confirmation if this is accurate or not, but what it seems to me is those special types of subtypes of classic skills that had this catalog, because there was an API to put things into this catalog and to get things out of its catalog, it was a lot less coding of the skill as opposed to saying, I've got this radio skill and here's the catalog that it uses. they've just reused that same catalog and put Alexa Plus in front of it. So there, if you do fall into that special subclass of skills, then there is a chance, and it hasn't really been published exactly what that breadth is or whatever, but there is a chance that some of those things would be migrated pretty much pain free
The
over
impression
to that
the
new one.
impression I had was that any of the skills that had clearly predefined intents, so that you had no control over the phrases of the intents or anything. You were told what intents you needed to implement. The impression I had was those intents weren't going to change, but Alexa Plus might enhance the conversation around them now.
Okay, yeah, that does seem that seems to match up close to what my understanding is. So yeah, well, that's kind of a wait and see, but there is a chance if you were in that world, um, then that might
Right.
yeah
Then
you
then
might
you
be pleasantly surprised.
right. You don't have to do anything. This now happens for you.
Yeah,
But the the actually interesting part is that they kind of defined three categories of new skills. So let's go
and
through them.
yeah, and so all three of them begin with Alexa AI, just to make sure that you know it's Alexa and it is AI.
Just in
But
case you hadn't tuned in recently.
and all three of them end in SDK. So there's some sort of programming library or interface that developers can use to program against. So if we take off all the prefix and the suffix of it, one is action, the other is web action, and the third one is multi agent.
All of which are intriguing in different ways.
Yeah. So, and each of them will, let's see, two out of the three have a short little video that kind of gives you an idea. And it's based on like Ticketmaster or Thumbtack. So you can kind of get a
We'll,
feel for
we'll get to
like
this.
maybe what kind of thing it is. But so do we want to jump into the first one then? The
Let's take them in
action.
order.
All right. So the action one, um, my understanding from reading this and asking some questions was that if you have an SDK someplace to drive something, then you can plug in that SDK into with this SDK, and Alexa can then use your APIs to do things. Now, what's kind of telling on the form where up here on the same blog post, there's a form that says, what is your preferred integration approach and what type of external APIs do you have? But it talks about use cases. And I
Yep.
think this is kind of where what they're looking for
Those
and
use
wanting to
cases,
focus on first. Yeah.
those use
Because
cases were incredibly telling to me and really worrying to me in a lot of ways.
so reservations, whether that be dining or entertainment, home services, whether that be home repair or maintenance, um, local experiences booking. So, like, I guess events and activities, food ordering, grocery ordering, event ticketing, movie ticketing, travel, whether research or booking, transportation, and then other. So those are where they're feeling like the biggest bang is. And I think they would probably, the partners that they've selected now and the ones that they probably want to work with first would be those that fall into those categories.
So the way I would describe all of these are basically the categories are reserving stuff to sell, selling a service, selling an experience, selling food, selling food, selling an experience, selling an experience, selling a service or other. I feel like the key word in all of those is selling. So,
Yes.
and that's very much where Alexa Plus is kind of pushing its focus is on how can people sell stuff through Alexa. And I don't
Yeah.
think that's a surprising trend.
No, and I think a lot of it is also like, how can we sell stuff through Amazon through Alexa,
Yes.
right?
Well,
We've got, it's not to the point where like buying products other than like food, groceries, but they do have a food delivery service.
yeah.
They do have,
I, to me, what this says is along the lines of they were raked over the coals when it came to monetization.
yep.
So they're saying, okay, here's how you monetize with Alexa Plus. You sell stuff. We're not going to pay you. We're just giving you a conduit to sell stuff.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how that pans out.
Right. Because I mean, it basically takes them out of the business of having to figure out how to pay you for an app. It's now completely on you to figure out how you make money with these skills.
Yeah.
Um, so this first way though, again, it's interesting that basically they're saying if you have an API, we will give you a way to define your API to Alexa Plus somehow. And we'll take care of the magic. That's kind of what it sounds like to me, right?
Yeah. But what's also the, what's not said and which is would and wasn't demoed, so maybe this is a change, is that you no longer access a skill by name.
Right.
And so Amazon becomes the, in essence, search engine for agents or APIs or experiences, and it picks. Now, it's talking about personalization and preferences. So maybe there's a way that you can say, I prefer, Uber as my driver, and I prefer, X as my fast food restaurant, or this is a list of fast food restaurants. I don't know where preferences were going to come from, or if they just like using it and then pulls out certain attributes and gets it listed in your preferences, or even if it's that
Right.
sophisticated. But um, yeah, so like, how does it know what to recommend for you?
Really good questions. We don't have answers for you.
We
Um,
don't. And
I
as a developer, don't know how much experience or
right.
how much availability that you have. Do you pay for higher placement? And
Ooh, good question.
I don't know.
But again, as developers, I think one of the things that a lot of people both were speculating, and again, kind of assumed
Yeah.
this was how it was going to work, is very similar to how the current crop of large language models we have function calling.
Yep.
So basically, what Amazon is saying is, what we don't know how it works under the hood, but we can kind of guess that how it works under the hood is function calling. You're defining functions. It will provide these functions with these definitions to Alexa Plus for you and magically call the right functions when it needs to in the right order. You just need
Yeah.
to define those.
Yeah.
Um,
So it seems more like a configuration of functions
right.
of API calls to call, as opposed to like any function, any like glue, or like calling those in certain orders, or that's kind of more the third category, which is the multi-agent.
We'll get to that.
But yeah, yeah, I
The
just wanted to point it down to, we'll
yep.
talk about it later.
The other thing that I think is interesting is that if you kind of, one of the things they say is in this initial phase, we're focusing on reservations for dining and entertainment, home services, including repair and maintenance, and booking local activities and events. If you go back and look at what Siri is launching in their initial batch of Apple Intelligence, it's much the same.
Yeah,
And I'm kind of imagining that it's going to be much the same thing, that really what's happening again under the hood is that Amazon isn't saying you define the functions and we'll just tell the Alexa Plus LLM about it. They are saying we are training the Alexa Plus LLM on these specific functions. And you now need to build that glue in between our function definition and your API. And I
yeah,
don't know that's what they're going to do, but that's my guess
yeah,
about what this SDK part really is that something has to build that glue and you get to do it.
yeah,
So that's the Action SDK. And My take on it is this is the one that they're most focusing on. This is the important one to them, not least of
Yeah,
which
I
because they
think
listed it first.
yeah, I think so, and I think, as I'm trying to decide, like, as a classic Alexa developer, is this the area that I focus on first, or is that not gonna be available to me if I don't fit into those certain categories? If I have some other skill that does call an API that does something, but it doesn't necessarily fall into that list of things, then, I don't know, I might have to wait on that,
Right. I
but
mean,
so yeah,
I,
I don't know where, like, the classic Alexa developer is going to point to. Is it gonna be 1, 2, or 3 in this list?
I think they've made it clear that unless, right now, if you're not doing dining, entertainment, repair, maintenance, and booking local activities and events, you're not you're not at the top of the list.
Yeah.
If your skill used to do those things, they'll talk to you. But right now, otherwise, there's no point in trying to port those over because you're porting it over to something that Amazon's not supporting yet. Um, but speaking of porting things over, the second is their web action interaction. And I keep reading through this trying to understand what in the world this means. Does it mean to you?
Yeah, what it seems like to me is, like, what, what it seems like from rereading it is that web action means that I'm a developer that doesn't have an API, but I have a web experience, and I would really like Alexa to be a voice interface to it. Now, I don't know if that means that it scrapes the website and because there's RAG examples where you crawl your own website and then you can do frequently asked questions. I don't know if that partly falls into this category. Um, but I also don't know if it's like if I've got different forms to fill out. So like maybe I can order something or, reserve something via my website and I don't have an API, then maybe this is a way to do that. I don't know what type of SDK or glue would need to
Well,
be in the middle of that to
right.
like drive the web page or to connect a user to an account but
Connecting a user to accounts, a really big question I have on all of these.
yeah,
Um,
QR code.
yes, they do say that.
They do say that. So that's all they
Um,
say.
I still think that doesn't answer my questions, but okay. Um, but I mean, for this section, what it says is, Alexa Plus introduces agentic capabilities, nice buzzwords there, enabling self-directed internet navigation. Okay, very agentic, sounds very flexible. To complete tasks on the customer's behalf, designed to work with existing websites using low-code workflows. What does that mean? Does that mean that me as a website developer takes you through the steps on my website, teaches Alexa how to do this? Does this mean
Yeah.
me as a customer of the website does that? Does this mean that the Alexa agent navigates this in my browser, in a headless browser, when I ask it to? I don't know what this means.
Yeah. So that is interesting because I was going to bring up the headless browser and like how we've for you know, decade or more been able to drive websites for testing purposes using, some sort of a headless browser that goes through and says, "Okay, I'm on this page, so I'm going to log in. Now I'm on this page. I'm going to select this checkbox, enter this into this text field, and click the third button." Or,
Right,
so is that what they're talking about? And is that task completion, the low code part, going to be some sort of instructions for like navigating a headless browser on your site?
right. This is as vague as what Rabbit was promising a year ago, and we
Oh,
know where
that's
that
right. That
went.
was very similar to what Rabbit was doing. Yeah.
Right? No, Rabbit was saying, we'll be navigating a website. The difference was Rabbit was saying that, they would do it automatically. That there wasn't any training. Well, maybe they did say that, if you wanted your website compatible, you would train it. I don't remember anymore.
Yeah, I don't
But
remember.
I mean, this is interesting. The only other element of this that makes me believe that it's somebody has to train this is that they were using Thumbtack as an example of finding a plumber, I guess, on Thumbtack's
Yeah.
website. And they made it sound like that it was Thumbtack that trained Alexa on how to do this, on how to do that searching, on how to navigate Thumbtack's own website, which makes this a lot less impressive.
Yeah, no, I was just I'm trying to think of it. I'm like, I don't know what the interaction would be, and I was thinking back to the demo that they gave where they did the initial voice query and then a list of little thumbnails of the different service providers, and and you said the first one, and then it drilled into the details for that first, and then you could say, so
And it sounded like it filled out a form behind the scenes for you.
yeah, so that's what it seems like the SDK part would have to be, right? Would be but it still doesn't get to the how does it know to call your experience over somebody else's? And also, are they still more concerned about the home services, the buy, reserve um, thing? So does the same kind of like highest priority of what they're going to focus on first, that same list for whether it was action or web action? Yeah, because it seemed the example they gave obviously was a home services example, which was the thing that was on their list before. So, um, yeah, it does seem like there has to be some sort of programming like this. Maybe like on this page, this is the thing that this does, a description maybe, and you know, walking through what the different form fields are, and I don't know, just kind of more of a
Right.
um,
It's very vague.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Nothing, no documentation yet, so we don't really have the details, but yeah, this could be interesting. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of developer heavy lifting on this. Um,
but nothing is nearly as vague as the multi-agent option.
yes. Yeah, and kind of the what a little clarification I got on this was that if you already have a bot or agent that does something,
Which
then you
everybody
can
does
surf
now.
yeah, which means then you can surface that to Alexa. So that seems more um, like I'll talk about the world of Jovo. So for example, when I programmed Alexa with Jovo, there were certain utterances and they turn into intents and they do things and they come back with a response. Now, all that was programmatic and deterministic and, um, but with that same Jovo framework, I could use that same backend core for a chatbot or for a voice bot or for a, so would that classify as an agent that I could then surface with the multi agent one? I don't know.
I mean, the examples they give are we're working with Suno, an agent for generative music, and we built a math tutor agent powered by APIs from Wolfram. Okay. I mean, that's both of those sound interesting. Both of those sound powerful. But how do these differ from how do these differ from a classic Alexa skill?
Yeah,
What's the difference? And they're not, they're not, they don't,
yeah,
they
because in
don't
the
know.
end, right? Your Alexa calls some webhook that's hosted somewhere, and it takes in requests and it returns responses. Now, if that's the thing, then why aren't they touting? We can make any of your existing Alexa custom Alexa skills into Alexa plus
Right. What's the
multi agents
difference?
or yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's the thing. It's not clear. Um,
Right.
so
You know, I think the big difference here is that they are talking about stuff besides the purchase something,
Yeah.
an agent for generative music, a math tutor. These fall outside of their other categories, but it's not
Yes.
clear what and they don't show any examples. It's not clear what the integration with Alexa Plus will be. So we don't
Yeah.
know if we'll be able to say, "Hey Alexa, I want you to quiz me on, 10 algebra problems." If we don't know what that experience is going to feel like,
Right.
and I think that's the question. Well,
Yeah.
it's one of many questions.
One of many questions. Yeah. So when the documentation for this comes out, and after we're able to dive into it, then we'll definitely have to come back and kind of talk about in detail. So they've kind of at least put a stake in the ground and say this is the direction that we're going, and there's three different options, and we've at least proven it enough that we feel like we can announce it, and that partners have demos that they can show with it. So
And that it's going to be out relatively soon. I mean, they were saying at this point it is months before Alexa Plus comes out. Like,
yeah.
people will be able to use it, and developers
So
will be able to develop for it.
maybe, yeah, maybe you can use it first before. So a capability that they don't really talk about in this, and doesn't necessarily, maybe because it doesn't really impact developers, is just asking Alexa questions about things. And if it's got an LLM behind the scenes and you ask those types of questions to ChatGPT or to Gemini or to some other LLM, then I'm assuming you can get answers back in some sort of conversation there. Now, not sure what they've done to solve hallucinations um,
Same thing
in those
everyone's done to
areas.
solve hallucinations. Nothing.
Nothing. So, um, I think there's that ability. The other thing that they kind of touched on, or at least some of the examples, were like, tell me when the price changes or the price is below something. And then it said that it would make that available through Echo devices and the Alexa app. So I don't know if that's like some extra sauce that the developer would have to create. And so maybe that's part of the typical action one, where if you make an action call that determines that it's a price change thing, then then I would assume that the developer organization, whether that be Spotify or whatever, would have to program in their things and say, hey, put this in some list and then evaluate it on a daily basis or every 15 minutes or I don't know, whatever,
I
and then get back to them.
I think
But
that's going to be an interesting question to see exactly how those kinds of event-driven
yeah,
operations take place. Is this something that Amazon will be running periodically, or is it something that we as developers need to implement periodically,
right.
and then surface it as a notification? And if it's a notification, what do notifications look like?
Yes.
Where are our limits on notifications? Because that was one of the major complaints about about notifications in the old Alexa,
Yeah.
is they were not considered good, at least not from a developer point of view.
Yeah, there was only a subset of what things you could notify on, and it didn't fit different categories. Like if you had a game and you wanted to notify that something was available in the game, you couldn't do that because it didn't fit into one of the different categories.
And
So,
I feel like we're about to hit the same thing. Amazon is defining very, very narrow categories that
yeah,
most apps will be expected to run in. And if you don't fit those categories, tough. And, to be honest, we've seen, this is not the first time we've seen this. Google did this with various things. Google did this back in the Google Plus days. Facebook did this with some of their APIs. They don't work. They just don't work. There's no way to make them broad enough to meet everyone's desires.
right.
So you end up with a narrow experience.
Yeah, that is a risk.
I feel like that's my biggest concern, not just about Alexa Plus, to be fair,
Yeah,
but also about Apple Intelligence. And I am sure that, and I don't know, but I am sure Google is going to do something almost identical because everyone's doing it. It's the easiest approach to this to get started with it
Yeah.
is that you define it in narrow categories and you claim you'll expand those categories over time and it goes slowly, so
Yeah.
you end up with, I think it's going to be a really, really poor experience. I think people will be thrilled with what it does. The fact that I'll be able to ask slightly better questions and get slightly better answers, that's great.
Yeah.
I don't think there are going to be all that many people that are excited about the fact I can now be passive aggressive with Alexa and say, "Hey, Alexa, it's dark in here. Hint, hint, hint." I don't think many people are going to have those kinds of interactions.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm cautiously pessimistic.
On the flip side, I'm at least a little more excited than normal because something new has come out,
There is
and
that. I will grant that.
it allows possibly an opportunity for me as a developer to develop something for Alexa, which is are devices that generally I enjoy. I haven't ever felt like I've gotten full potential out of them. But I still have devices. I know lots of people still do. According to the article, what 600 plus million devices still out there, or it is time to act on doing something with them, or they will just get thrown away eventually.
So I guess this gets back to the question that you asked at the beginning of, is this going to make developing for Alexa fun again?
Um,
Well, let's give our predictions now. And, in a bunch of episodes, we'll see if we're right or wrong.
I say it will, but I'm not going to be giddy. I'll enjoy it, but I won't be giddy.
I am going to say that it's not going to be for the simple let me put it this way. Certainly the first two categories of, the action web action. I don't think there's anything terribly exciting about either of those. They are practical, certainly. They will introduce, they will let certain subsets do interesting things. I think the jury's really going to be out about whether doing that is better. Am I going to want to, if I'm trying to grab a ticket through Ticketmaster for a concert, am I going to want to try to get it through Alexa when Ticketmaster is slow enough on the web? I don't
Yeah,
think so. I'm not going to, I don't see what the advantage is. Their example of booking a reservation at a restaurant, that felt very, very stilted to me. That felt like an Alexa classic skill conversation, not a
yeah,
dynamic. I was expecting more of a, "Hey, I've heard about this new restaurant down on Park Street, but I don't remember its name." And Alexa
yeah.
suggesting it. And these,
Oh, yeah,
"Oh, that sounds good. Yeah. I need let me book something for Saturday night." It says, "Well, would you like something more like 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock?" But instead, the conversation starts off as, "I want to book a reservation for two at this restaurant at 4 o'clock on Saturday."
yeah,
We don't talk that way. And we know we don't talk that way. So showing an example of that just felt 10 years old. I have no better way to put it. It did not feel like a modern AI conversation. That said, I really, really am curious what the multi-agent experience is going to be like.
yeah. I am too.
That's where I think there's some potential to make things interesting, both for developers and for people who are using Alexa Plus.
Because if they're able to somehow thread the needle where I can have a control over the conversation or what flows happen, but I'm also able to pass back data and they generate the response, the varied response, as opposed to me having to do canned responses, that might be interesting.
Yes. And on the other hand, I also want to make sure it doesn't go off the rails with the
True.
conversation. That's tricky. So, if it means I can design conversations without having to be precise about my wording and have that automatically work in a bunch of languages, which Alexa Plus initially won't do. It's just English to start.
Yeah.
Just English in the US to start. Um, you know, if it does all of these things, which is a whole lot of really big ifs, I think it can make developing for Alexa fun again. I think we will be out there building new experiences, building new skills, doing things that we couldn't do either under the old Alexa or on websites or,
Yep.
building, there's a lot that I can see that again makes it voice conversational. One of the really, really frustrating things for me watching things like ChatGPT, I'm like, this is a terrible typed experience. But as a voice experience, it would be wonderful. That's what I want. And that's what makes me excited about this announcement is
Y
that glimmer that that's where we're going to get to.
yeah,
Maybe,
just maybe they figured it out.
maybe.
Um, so, there's, lots of questions. Obviously, won't know until we have access to documentation and can start, playing around and experimenting. But another question I have and what I've seen with LLMs is just takes a long time to respond.
Yes.
Now, before Alexa had like a 7-second, if your API or your, anything processing from input to output took longer than 7 seconds, um, then things timed out. And did they change the model completely? Is it more of a streaming model? Is it, are those same restrictions there? And because the restrictions were there partly because it's just poor user experience, just to like ask a question and then 7 seconds later or 10 seconds later or 2 minutes later, um, still having it do something and not really communicate back to you. So have they figured out this ability and with those notifications we mentioned before to have these asynchronous conversation models? Keep thinking back about the Star Trek computer. You say, Star Trek computer, go churn on something and let me know when you have an answer, or do a system diagnostic and, come back when you've checked everything.
And
Or,
I think the good news on this front is that outside of Amazon, we've started to see models that are doing this. So we
yeah,
saw um one of the GPT-4 variants, and Gemini 2 has a live variant where they are doing this streaming audio asynchronously. Um, we are seeing examples of, how we can give a partial result and say, if you look at some of the deep thinking models that are out there now, they're saying things like, okay, I've started it, I'll get back to you with an answer. So this notion of a long running job
yeah,
is now in the mix, but we don't know how much Alexa is going to tap into that because you're right. You need to be able to give a quick response. What I mean, I remember my early, user interface design classes called this the trivial response time. You weren't necessarily giving the final answer, but you needed to acknowledge that you heard them, that you're heard, that you're acknowledging the user did something,
yeah,
that they clicked that button. You need to show that they clicked that button. You can't do anything yet, but the user now knows that they were heard. And I think that's actually one of the things that the chat conversation models, even as slow as they were able to deal with was saying, let's lower that time to the first token and start sending that token back. It'll take us a while to get the whole response out, but as long as we reply quickly to start, they know something has happened.
yeah,
I think it's a great question. And I think you're right. That's probably the first big question about this, followed by monetization, followed by identity, followed by, there's lots and lots of stuff that they need to answer quickly.
Yeah,
speaking of answering quickly.
personalization, notifications, yeah. And are they focusing, because all the demos obviously, and maybe just because they were demos, were Echo Show devices, so screened devices. Is that a primary way that, is that gonna be a higher experience than voice only?
If I remember correctly, so that's interesting, especially in the sense that they didn't actually talk about multimodal output. They never
Yeah,
really said anything about that. They didn't say what was happening to widgets. All of the demos they showed looked mostly like text conversations, possibly with some supplements. It didn't look like a
yeah,
rich media response. But I believe the initial rollout is just for the screen devices. But audio only devices will be supported. So, I don't know what that means.
yeah. And so then if there is some visual response, multimodal response coming back, is there an Alexa presentation, an APL plus, or is it something else? Is it typical web? So, all kinds of fun questions once you start getting into the details.
All sorts of questions, lots of unknowns. But I have a funny feeling as we find out these answers, we will be back to talk to them on Two Voice Dev.
Two voice devs. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Mark. Good to see you again. This has been a great conversation. I can't wait to see where this goes.
Yeah, it'll be interesting as well. Thank you.